A bump brought Aethiawi back to the edge of consciousness. She felt cool air blowing softly on the front of her shoulder. Sounds gradually became louder. Her mind tried to focus through a fog. She heard a mumbling that sounded like nearby voices trying to speak quietly. She was sitting up but leaning over. Her head hung off to the side. She felt a strap of some sort diagonally across her chest. A rumble through her feet. A car? Old brakes squealed. She was definitely in a car. Her forward momentum struggled briefly with her seatbelt. She allowed herself to sink back into the seat. The motor idled. A moment passed. She fought against a strange grogginess behind her face. Throat dry and scratchy. Her eyelids heavy. She was incredibly thirsty. With more effort than should have been necessary, she opened her eyes slightly to sneak a peek at her surroundings. Gummy, sticky mucus stretched over her vision, blurring her sight. Still daytime. Her eyes took their time adjusting to the light. She was in the back seat, sitting behind the driver. The windows were up, and the air conditioning was on. 2 people sat in the front, waiting for a stoplight. The passenger's head turned her way. She closed her eyes. A moment passed. Their voices resumed. "I still think the run should be rescheduled," the driver said, a woman's voice. The passenger gave an exasperated sigh. "The matter's been settled. The girl there won," a man's voice. "I still don't get it," the driver replied, a bit too loudly. She paused, then continued with a harsh whisper. "How can she have won? She didn't officially enter the run, and she didn't place a wager." The car eased back into motion. The driver went on. "It shouldn't be allowed. All she really did was interrupt the run. She got in the way. That's not winning it. We had to stop the race to get her to safety. You can't seriously stand by this call." "For the love of Tundra," the passenger hissed back. He looked out the side window. "You were there." His tone was annoyed, as if he were repeating the exact same words used in an earlier, identical conversation with the driver. "The girl fell from the sky on a busted-up glider. She landed on top of it in the middle of a river of lava. She managed to get up and jump clear of the glider before it burned to ashes, and she got into the cave with nothing more than a few scrapes on her hands and arms. She had no protective gear aside from her mask and goggles. The only clothing she had on was leather boots, jeans, and a shirt." The passenger looked directly at the driver. "Jeans and a shirt! On a river of lava! We had on full heat suits. I doubt any of us could have survived a fall like she did, even with our suits on." He paused to catch his breath. The driver protested. "You don't know that." "I know you couldn't have," the passenger replied in his coldest tone. The conversation stopped dead. The silence charged with tension. Old brakes squealed again. The car slowed to a stop. "I'm the judge of this run," said the passenger. "My decision stands." "I'll make an appeal," the driver said defensively. "It was all vidcast. Each of us had a camera and a mic, remember? All the judges saw it, and the majority have already agreed with my ruling. Once Phaedra makes the announcement, it'll be official." "But it was a fluke!" "Exactly." Horns blared suddenly behind them. The driver grunted in disgust and jammed the accelerator a little too hard. The car jumped into motion. A few seconds went by. Aethiawi parted her eyelids to slits again. The interior of the car was fuzzy and indistinct through the sleep obscuring her vision. The passenger glowered through the window at his side, deliberately ignoring the driver. The driver moved into the far left lane and slowed for a red light. Aethiawi shot her hand over to unlock the door, but the seatbelt reacting to her sudden movement locked her into place. Her hand stopped well short of the door control. The driver saw the motion in the rearview mirror and yelled out, "Hey!" Aethiawi quickly unbuckled her seatbelt and unlocked the door. The passenger looked to the driver with a somewhat hostile but puzzled expression. Then he saw Aethiawi hustling to leave the vehicle, and he understood. He reached back to try to grab her, but missed as she turned her body to open her door. "Wait!" the passenger called to her. He continued to speak, but Aethiawi didn't stick around to listen. She jumped from the car. The seatbelt snagged her arm as she left, spinning her off balance just a bit. She stumbled and jammed the front of her foot on the curb, yelped as she tripped onto the walkway, but avoided falling by quick-stepping into a run opposite the flow of traffic, all the while wiping sleep from one eye and then the other with her fingertips. The passenger unstrapped his seatbelt and unlocked his door. "Don't let her get away!" the driver yelled at him. "She's not a prisoner!" he snapped. And not waiting for an answer, he popped open his door and took a step out of the car. The traffic light turned green. Drivers behind them laid on their horns. The passenger saw a few other drivers placing calls in their cars as they stared suspiciously at him. "Get us out of here," the passenger told the driver as he retook his seat and closed the door. "We're gonna have to ditch the car." The driver hit the accelerator and they sped off. The back door swung shut. The passenger pulled his S-Link out of a waist pocket. It resembled an old-fashioned pocket watch. A stylish chain hung gracefully from its bottom to a clasp on his belt. The passenger opened the watch face and placed a call of his own. Meanwhile, Aithiawi had already run half a block away. She turned the corner around a 2-story red brick building, spotted a city cop at the next street, and began to shout to get his attention. The vehicle Aithiawi escaped from was long gone by the time she calmed down enough for the city cop to understand her story. The cop was good enough to call the incident in and went around the block with her to look for the car as a courtesy. Truth be told, Aithiawi didn't really remember what kind of vehicle it was, nor could she honestly recall what either the driver or the passenger looked like. She was too groggy, her eyes were too gummed up, and she was too busy trying not to get kidnapped to take in all the important details at the time. A couple of hours passed, and Aithiawi found herself sitting on an old, scratched-up wooden bench in the hallway of a local police station, sipping water from a paper cup. Her dark skin glowed in the light of the setting sun, shining through the station's open front door. She looked toward her feet. The surface of the marble floor was dull with the wear of years. She winced slightly. Her head ached, mostly behind her right ear. She wondered what she hit down there in that cave. Looking up at the community board, she read an ad for the local pet hospital. New Lodell's best, it said at the bottom. New Lodell. A bustling little town, 150 kilometers from Fire Canyon. Aithiawi shrugged. No big shock there, as Fire Canyon wasn't anywhere near close to any civilized anything. But that did mean that she was more than 200 kilometers from home. Not that she'd be missed by anyone there, but home was home, and all she wanted to do right now was pop some pills and crawl into bed. Having filed the police report about 20 minutes ago, Aithiawi called her mother from the station's S-Link to come pick her up, but her mother never answered. So she called a car service to come get her and charged it to her father's account. Her own S-Link, ID, and her son's had been with her driver at Fire Canyon, but the automated reservation system for the car service matched her voice print, so she didn't need her ID or son's to charter another car. Half an hour later, the desk sergeant on duty came over and sat next to Aithiawi on the bench. The young girl had just gotten back from going to the bathroom. "Your car is here, Miss Go," he said. "Oh, okay. Thanks. Thanks so much." She shook his hand and rose to leave, but before she took a step, the sergeant added, "If, in the future, you suspect that you are being followed or watched, don't hesitate to give us a call." He handed her his business card, flipped it over to show handwriting on the unprinted side. "Here's my card. On the back is the name of a friend of mine in the Belindu police force." Aithiawi took the card and gave it a brief look before she put it in her back pocket. "Belindu," she said. "Right. The largest town near her rural home." "My friend's a detective," the sergeant continued. "If you need, she'll be able to help you out a lot more than a desk jockey like me." He smiled in an effort to comfort the dark young girl. "Oh, great." She forced a smile for his benefit. The desk sergeant stood and gave her a short, waist-high wave. She waved back, turned, and lost in her thoughts about the day's events, she exited the building in a daze. Skipping down the stairs of the police station with her eyes on her feet and her mind back at Fire Canyon, Aithiawi didn't notice the giant, lumbering figure coming up those same stairs until it was too late. She bounced right off the giant's chest and fell to her butt. Papers leapt into the air like a flock of frightened birds. Aithiawi looked up through the fluttering, falling sheets of white and froze in surprise. Her light brown eyes went wide with shock, her voice caught in her throat, and her mind reeled as she struggled to believe what her eyes saw. Above her stood a real, live, non-human alien. A real, live, fucking alien.